is the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS Show with John Impemba and James Grande.
What's going on, FA Nation? Happy Monday and welcome into the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS preview show. I am James Grande. I am your host today. I'm flying solo on today's show. We have a 2-game NBA DFS main slate for Monday, May 6th. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Hope everyone enjoyed some NBA hoops. The Orlando Magic lost a tough Game 7 over the weekend. The Denver Nuggets, who are on today's slate, lost a tough Game 1 at home against the now undefeated Minnesota Timberwolves this postseason. So, 2-game slate here. Should be a quick show. Pacers, Knicks start us off at 7:30, and Minnesota Denver is the late night 10 p.m. game. So let's start off. We'll go team by team. Any questions, please do leave them in the comment section below. If you have the time to please like this video, subscribe to the channel as well. We appreciate your guys' support immensely. So let's get into it. We'll start with the Pacers side of things. In that game, 217.5 implied points, and the Knicks are 6.5-point home favorites. Let's start on Indiana. A good series win against Milwaukee. Obviously, not a whole Milwaukee. They were obviously without Giannis Antetokounmpo the entire series. Damian Lillard missed a couple games. Chris Middleton was battling 2 ankle injuries simultaneously. Bobby Portis was battling demons, his own, as he was ejected from one game. So there was a lot going on in Milwaukee, but nevertheless, Indiana advances 4-2 in Game 6. They win at home. And yeah, so now they take on the Knicks. Let's start off at the top. 8,300 for Tyrese Halliburton. Still dealing with these back spasms that he's been dealing with. He's been okay. Nothing to write home about. Double-double against Milwaukee in their closeout game. Only had to play 32 minutes. Was the second best pacer. Second best point guard on the Pacers, I should say. So if you want to get to Halliburton 83, it's fine. After an elite start to the series, Pascal Siakam, was fine the rest of the series. Only one other game outside games 1 and 2 where he notched 40-plus fantasy points. But the minutes were obviously elite for Siakam. Outside of 2, blowouts at the end, he loses some time there. So I'm not really going to ding Siakam for that all that much. He was on pace to play about 38 minutes in this game. So, 38 minutes is an elite number at 8,100. Miles Turner, 6,700. Obviously, he had the elite start to that series, did not finish that way. No one on the Pacers was good in Game 5. And, that was this one here. And then Game 6, he was in foul trouble all night. And Obi Toppin was amazing off the bench in Turner's steed. They have not really been running a secondary center. They did use Isaiah Jackson a little bit in this game once Turner got in that early second quarter foul trouble. But I don't expect them. I mean, I guess possibly with the Knicks' length, they could. So I guess we'll see if Jalen Smith or Isaiah Jackson are dusted off. But it was of the 2 backup centers behind Turner, it was Isaiah Jackson who got the most run last series. 10-9 minutes the last 2 games. So keep that in mind. Turner, elite in tournaments, if you want to get there. Andrew Nembhard had an amazing series against Milwaukee Bucks. Outside of game 1, 30, 29, 33, 23, 32 fantasy points for Nembhard. Shot the ball extremely well, obviously, 60% or better in 4 of the last 5 games. Was really good peripherally. He is not like a great fantasy point per minute guy. But if you do end up getting to Andrew Nembhard, $5,000 is a pretty good price for him. A really good price is Aaron Nesmith at 4,800. This is going to be a very interesting series for Nesmith because we're probably going to see him guarding a lot of Jalen Brunson. And he's usually used as their primary ball defender. And when he's not in the game, it's usually tasked to the aforementioned Andrew Nembhard. But Nesmith is going to be guarding Jalen Brunson a lot in this series. we'll see how much that takes out of him on the other end of the floor on the offensive side. He didn't have his best offensive series against Milwaukee. No, like real breakout games, but for the last 5 games, he did score in double figures. Obviously, the stats peripherally were fine. Had a couple outliers, rebounds, an 8 rebound game, 7 assist game. The defensive numbers were there. He's obviously, you're not guarding Jalen Brunson because you're not a good defender. Like they're gonna usually Jalen Brunson draws the opposing team's best defender. So 4,800 for Neesmith, if he's gonna get anywhere between 38 or 36 to 43 minutes, is a really good number for a starter who again is on the floor a lot. Had a really good year shooting three, 40%. For a while it was much higher. So if you want to get Darren Neesmith at 48, that's a really good play. The rest of the rotation is interesting, because again, especially when you look at game 6 against Milwaukee, TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin were great. They were the keys to victory here. McConnell scored 20 actual points in this game, 1 assist shy of a double double in just 23 minutes, which is what TJ McConnell kind of does. He is a really good fantasy per minute player. So he had some ups and downs in the series. 2 of the last 3 games, 25 plus fantasy points. The other 4, between 13 and 14 fantasy points. So not the best, but if he's playing 18 to 23 minutes in any range of like that, I mean, there is a ceiling of 4,400. So, and same thing can be said about Obi Toppin. This has been a great postseason for Obi Toppin. And, you know, for all those that care about revenge, just saying, he was drafted by and eventually traded by the New York Knicks. So, Toppin has been their easily the best member of this Pacers bench. Basically, outside of game 1, has been amazing. Amazing return on his price point. I mean, 36, 26, 23, 21 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. 3 of the 5, he's played at least 20 minutes, which has been great. In the more competitive games, you saw it. Like it's in the teens, and that's probably where this series is going to sit in most of these games. I think it's going to be a pretty competitive series throughout. So you're probably going to get the 17-minute Obi Toppin games more often than you get the 24, 23. But when he's shooting the ball well and active defensively and on the glass, I mean, you could get Obi Toppin 20 minutes, no pun intended there, and and then we're cooking with something at 4,200. Only guy I mentioned is Ben Shepherd. He's been steadily playing and getting double-digit fantasy points. But is it is it worth it to get a potential 10 fantasy points? I don't know. But he's 3,300. He's on the floor. Could play 20 minutes here. So let's shift over to the Knicks side. Nothing else to talk about on Indiana. Obviously, here's the head of the spear. Jalen Brunson has had a magical postseason, especially after a rough start in games 1 and 2 against Philly. Obviously, game 2, he hits one of those miraculous shots that did lead to a crazy Knicks comeback. But the last 4 games this series 41, 40, 47, 39 actual points, 3 double doubles in that, 64, 58, 71, 62 fantasy points. The minutes for Jalen Brunson have been amazing. He's failed to play 40 just once in the entire first round, in 6 games against the Philadelphia 76ers. So Jalen Brunson, you can argue per dollar is the best spend up of the slate. Edwards is 9K. Obviously, that's elite. Jokic, but Jokic is between Jokic, Edwards, and Brunson. I mean, Jokic is $2,000 more than Edwards and $1,500 more than Brunson. So if you want to start your build Brunson Edwards and not get up to Jokic, I mean, we're talking about guys who have right now similar production. So Jalen Brunson is as elite as it gets. This is a great matchup for the Knicks. Indiana's probably, and by probably, they're the worst defensive team remaining in the playoffs. I would say on either side of the NBA in either conference. So love Jalen Brunson all formats. Josh Hart was really, really good this series, especially from a fantasy perspective. You know what you're getting out of Josh Hart, even on nights where he doesn't shoot the ball well. You know that one, he's not coming off the floor. I mean, look at the minutes are absolutely ridiculous. I'm shocked to even see a 42 in that series. But every other game, 48, 43, 46, 53 minutes, played every single minute in overtime game, and 46 minutes. And even in games where he wasn't shooting the ball necessarily well, like game 4, where he didn't make a shot, he had 36 fantasy points because he's an elite rebounder. He's a very good playmaker, and he's very good defensively. So, love Josh Hart, 7,100. Whatever format you want to use him in, by all means, do so. He's been great. OG Anunoby had a really shaky start to his Philly series, and then came on really strong to finish. Was really, really good offensively for the Knicks. 16 plus points in 4 straight games. Kind of something that we've been looking for. I don't know if it was took a little bit longer for the elbow to heal, and now the shot's starting to fall, but the three ball is falling, the shots are falling. OG's been amazing rebounding the basketball, and defensively, we know how elite he is there. So he has been really good. I'm definitely interested in getting there, 5,900. Dante DiVincenzo is interesting. You got to catch him on the right night. Obviously, we saw 48-minute ceiling, so he played every minute against Philly. We also saw a 24-minute floor when the shots aren't falling. So there's a wide range of outcomes when it comes to Dante DiVincenzo. One, he starts. Two, when he makes shots, he stays on the floor. That's what, if you're playing DiVincenzo, that's what you're hoping for, right? You're hoping for the version that comes out and makes three threes right away. You're also kind of hoping on Deuce McBride not making shots, because anytime you see Deuce McBride come off the bench, he's a spark plug. Well, Thibodeau will keep him on the floor over DiVincenzo. So could definitely get the DiVincenzo shooting guard, small forward in tournaments. Isaiah Hartenstein, really solid basketball player. Had a very good series against Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. Probably going to settle into this 26 to 30-minute mark. Doesn't seem like Thibodeau is comfortable going higher than that. I know they reportedly have a cap on his minutes, and it seems to be 30. So if you get 30 minutes out of Hartenstein, I'm definitely interested at 5,200. Conversely, Mitchell Robinson, we did see 30 minutes in a game. We did see 25 minutes in a game. Both those games, he had 20 and 34 fantasy point outputs. He was really good on the glass, really good defensively. I mean, that's what he does. He is obviously hobbled when you watch him play. There's definitely some injury, some injure, some in the ankle is still hurt, for sure, but not even listed on the injury report going into game 1 of this series. So, if he comes in or Hartenstein's in foul trouble, I mean, Mitch Robinson could be the dominant member of the split. So I definitely like him at 4K. The only other guy the Knicks are going to play is Miles McBride. It just, which version do you get? He had been playing 20 plus minutes every single night for the Knicks. That was not the case in game 6. They did not sit Dante DiVincenzo. They only sat Josh Hart a couple minutes. They only sat Jalen Brunson a couple minutes. That only afforded McBride 9 minutes off the bench. But when you look at McBride, and this is something that a lot of people talk about when it comes to the playoffs, which role players are going to step up? And usually it happens more often at home because their home crowd, they're more comfortable there. And when you look at McBride, he had game 5 in New York, 29 fantasy points. Game 1, he was amazing. He probably was the X factor in that game. 21 actual, 35 fantasy points. So the biggest games McBride had were at home in that Philadelphia series. So keep that in mind. 3,900. This is a home game. Thibodeau is only going to play 7 guys. Maybe you see Precious Achua crack the rotation if there's foul trouble, but other than that, it's just going to be 7, and it's going to be heavy minutes on the Knicks. Definitely a lot of intrigue there. Moving on to Minnesota, Denver, where we have a 205.5 total. That's actually down from 208.5 upon open. So down people hammering the under already on 208.5. So down to 205.5. Denver, despite being down 1 in this series, are 5.5 point home favorites. Against the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have Anthony freaking Edwards. He has been, we talked about how good Jalen Brunson's been. Anthony Edwards has been that dude as well. And it's been kind of steadily rising to this point. But Edwards has ascended to superstardom. He had a bad game 2 against Phoenix, and in every other game has just been dominant. 33 actual, 56 fantasy points, 36 actual, 56 fantasy points, 40 and 43 actual, 68 and 63 fantasy point respectively in the last 2 games. Um, all the minutes, even in elevation in Denver, was able to play 42 minutes. I know he looked really tired. He talked about it after the game, but love Edwards shooting guard small forward at 9K, especially if he's going to continue to be this good. Even in matchups against KCP and Aaron Gordon. I mean, he did not shy away from those matchups, did not have any issue with them. So Anthony Edwards at 9K is elite. Rudy Gobert was very solid against Jokic and company. Didn't guard him. Initially, they used Karl Anthony Towns, which I think is going to be the matchup. It's kind of like how the Lakers used Rui Hachimura last postseason. A lot of teams like to cross matchup against Jokic, and when you have Gobert roaming the paint, I would do so too. 3 blocks and a steal, being kind of the help defender guarding Aaron Gordon, because we know Aaron Gordon hangs out in the dunker spot. So as long as Gobert gets to roam around the rim, which I wrote up in the showdown article over the weekend, I mean, there's a lot of upside for him because that if he's roaming around the rim, that means more people running into him for blocks, more rebound opportunities. So as long as those stay present, I'm definitely interested in Gobert. Obviously, six shot attempts, not great. 0 free throws for a guy who does take a bunch. I mean, 415 free throws on the regular season this year wasn't like great at taking them, but even in the Phoenix series, I mean, 3 of the 4 games he shot 7 free throws. So I would like to see that tick up. But 7K for Rudy Gobert is definitely interesting. Towns is kind of an X factor here. He was really bad for 3 quarters of this game. He was really good in the third quarter specifically to get him to 30 fantasy points. He's just been in foul trouble every game this postseason. And even in the game that he had an explosion in against Phoenix, in their closeout game, he still had 5 fouls. So, like, I'm interested in Karl Anthony Towns 6,800. But if they're cross matching with Towns and guarding him on Jokic, how off like can Karl Anthony Towns stay out of foul trouble this series? I don't know the answer, and I'm not sure the answer is yes. Obviously, there's tournament appeal at 6,800 because he's we just saw this 48 fantasy points. He's well over a fantasy point per minute, high usage rate player. So yeah, I mean appeal for Towns at 68, but hey, buddy, like get ready to learn which sheet yours is on the bench if you can't stay out of foul trouble. So, yeah, Towns in tournaments only. Michael Conley was great. I don't know why I called him Michael either. Mike Conley was great in game 1. 14 points, 10 assists, 4 rebounds. Obviously, like Conley's minutes are never going to be as high as everyone else's, especially with how it has been all year. I mean, 29 minutes per game. He played a ton of games, barely sat. 34 was the max in every game in Phoenix. And even when you look through his, I mean, how many times 36 in that Sacramento game, 36 in that Chicago game. I mean, twice, 3 times, 37 OKC. 3 times, 4 times this year did he go over 34 minutes. So, I'm sure if they need him to, they will look to go to Conley for more than 34, but they seem comfortable with low to mid 30s. But so am I at 5,400. If this is the version we're going to get where he's made multiple threes in 4 straight games, we're getting solid amount of peripheral stats, 14 rebounds plus assists. So, yeah, I like Mike Conley here a little bit at 5,400. Obviously, Jaden McDaniels, I mean, look at the up and down production, right? He is not a high usage player. He is not a very good offensive player. He was guarding Jamal Murray. He was guarding Michael Porter Jr. He has much more of an important assignment on the other side of the basketball than offense. When the offense comes, there's a pretty good ceiling of 4,500. And the one thing is about $4,500 price tag. You don't have a lot of $4,500 players on a 2-game slate that can play 40 minutes, right? We talked about Obi Toppin. He's 4,200. We talked about TJ McConnell. He's 4,400. Both those guys are solid tournament plays, but their ceilings are 24 minutes. Jaden McDaniels has a 40-minute plus ceiling, right? 41 minutes in game two against Phoenix in the playoffs. So, you know, if he is $4,500, whether or not he is high usage or elite offensive player, there has to be appeal. Stumble, fumble, bumble his way into enough fantasy points, and if the shot's falling like it did in game two, well, then we're cooking with gas at 42 fantasy points. So I'm good with getting some Jaden McDaniels. I'm not going overboard. Naz Reid was a second half difference maker in that game. Went on a 10-0 personal run in the fourth quarter. Edwards got him to halftime with a big game. Towns and Conley in the third quarter. Naz Reid in the fourth. Um, Naz Reid is going to play a lot if Karl Anthony Towns can't stay in foul trouble. So, there's a lot of appeal at 4,300. He's going to be really popular after his game one blow up. He is just a good fantasy point per minute guy. Truthfully, like if I'm picking between him and Jaden McDaniels, like I'm picking Naz Reid because the ceiling, the usage, the fantasy points per minute, all that. But obviously, like even in his best game this postseason, 23 minutes, right? So obviously the ceiling's a little capped as long as Gobert and Towns are there. Um, I didn't I don't love this series for Nickeil Alexander Walker. I'm not just saying that because game one. I just don't know if this is going to be his series. Phoenix was smaller. Phoenix runs 3 guard lineups. Denver doesn't. Denver runs big lineups a lot. So I think we're still going to get low 20s minutes. There's probably situations where he's making shots and there's a chance he creeps up to the 30 that he played. But I'm not certain that the 30 minutes that he played in the Phoenix series is guaranteed in this series. So tournaments only. I do think Kyle Anderson is going to stay in the rotation in this one. They use him to guard Jokic a lot. 4 fouls in 12 minutes. Kyle Anderson is hilarious. And that's it. That Kyle Anderson is like the last person. They gave Monty Morris some second half minutes, but um, just 3. So they're playing a very limited rotation as well. I don't expect that to get any longer, especially after winning game one in Denver. So that's it for Minnesota. Let's finish this thing off with Denver. Coming off a very disappointing game one, obviously. And Jokic was fine. Nothing special. Was not very efficient for a guy who shot 58% from the floor this year. Has not shot the ball well from 3 either. He took 9 3-pointers in this game, which very uncharacteristic, but it is also harder to score. It's easier to take a 3 against Minnesota because the likelihood of Rudy Gobert not being in your face is greater than it is when you're attacking the basket. So I do think Jokic is an elite play if you want to get there. The minutes are great, almost triple doubled, even in a night where he doesn't shoot the ball well. Had 32 actual, like 7 turnovers wasn't great. And the rebounds obviously were a little pedestrian for a guy who averages 12 and a half a game. So there's still some things to be left out on the. He left some fantasy stats on the table. So I'm okay getting to Jokic 11K. You don't hear me say this a lot, and I do think like he has the highest ceiling, I would say, of anyone on this slate. I think he's third for me though in terms of priority spend ups. I think Brunson and Edwards are ahead for me. So take that for what it's worth. That's not a knock on Jokic. I'm perfectly fine if you want to build around him, but 11K, I can get 9,500 for Brunson, $9,000 for Edwards. So, Jamal Murray does not look good. Did not look good again in this game. First time in his postseason career where he didn't score in a half. He did not score going into halftime. Had 17 in the second half, but 34 minutes. He's obviously dealing with this calf strain. I mean, he's questionable to play. Assuming he plays because he's played through this calf strain in the last few games. He just hasn't looked right this entire postseason. So they're going to need Jamal Murray to get right if they're going to beat Minnesota. I mean, it doesn't get any easier if they do beat Minnesota, right? It's going to be OKC or Dallas up next if they even get past Minnesota. So they need Jamal Murray in game 2 in a big way. But if he's not right, expect Michael Porter to just continue to chug along and be Denver's second best player because that's exactly what he's been. 20 points now in 5 straight games. The rebounds have been down the last 2 games, but he is a very good rebounder, as we saw this year, 7 rebounds per game. Very, very active defensively lately, too. The minutes have been tremendous. Something that the two things we worried about Michael Porter for a long time. Games, by the way, shout out to Michael Porter. 81 games played this year was probably not on my bingo card. And minutes. I mean, he's averaging 40 minutes per game this postseason. So Michael Porter's probably my favorite Denver play per dollar at $6,500. I'm just going to keep going back to that well. Aaron Gordon, perfectly fine if that's where you end up. The stats were fine. He's operating as the backup center here now. I will say, like, I wonder what Denver does here. When you look at their rotation in game 1, or you look at the rotation game 5 of the Lakers series, they played one guy off the bench in double figures. That was Reggie Jackson. In game 1 against Denver, game 1 against Minnesota, excuse me, Jackson, Justin Holiday, and Christian Brown all played in double figures. Down 1-0 to Minnesota on your home floor. Do they shrink the rotation? And do we see Gordon's minutes from 33 back up to 42, 41? Because as long as he stayed out of foul trouble, he has been operating as the backup center to Nikola Jokic, and they're just not using the backup center. So that's something to keep your eyes on. Aaron Gordon had a big stint in the second quarter where he just didn't play. So we got to keep our eyes on that. He is a good play if we're getting 40 minutes. A little indifferent about it at 33 at 6,200. KCP rounds out the starting 5. He's their floor spacer. They need him. He's gonna guard Edwards a lot, so he's your 3-and-D guy. When he makes multiple threes, he's fine. When he doesn't, 4,600. Christian Brown, this probably don't want to get there. I don't mind the 19 minutes, but if I'm punting a Denver play, it'd probably just be Reggie. But even that, I don't feel great about. So I think it's just the starting 5 for Denver, and that's really it. Yeah, I'm not going to build a lineup here, but if you have any questions, my Twitter handle is right here at the_real_grande. Find me on Twitter there. You can tag me alongside the Fantasy Alarm Twitter if you have a question for me. If you have a question for John and Pemba, I'll be writing the NBA DFS playbook on Monday. Please subscribe again to this YouTube channel. We really appreciate all the support throughout the postseason. And hey, if we get 2 games, we're going to continue to run this podcast. So we were going to stop it at the first round, but guess what? We're not. And that's because of you. That's because all you guys that continue to drop by every day and show us some love. So for myself, John will be back for the next 2-game slate. I think, do we have a 2-game slate on Tuesday? I don't know who plays on Tuesday, but let's see what days we'll have a podcast. So we'll have a podcast for Monday slate, Tuesday slate, Thursday slate, and Friday slate. So 4 or 5 days this week. Wednesday, we only have Knicks Pacers, so that will just be a showdown right up that you'll be able to find over on fantasyalarm.com. For myself, for Fantasy Alarm, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow.